අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Friday the 26th of May 2023. Legal protection. President Ranil Wickremesinghe plans to introduce new laws to protect mega projects. Warning. Human rights activist Dr. Pratibha Mahana-Meheva says another resolution at the upcoming UNHRC session is possible if the government fails to amend provisions on the anti-terror bill. Relief. Government to increase weekly quota for fuel from next month following the fuel price revision. Dollar income. Sri Lanka received $604 million worth of foreign investments during the first quarter of 2023.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරමක්.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. President Ranil Wickremesinghe pledges to bring in new laws on mega projects to ensure such projects cannot be halted arbitrarily by a single party or an official. Addressing a business roundtable titled Sri Lanka's Economic Revival and Opportunities for Japanese Enterprise, President Wickremesinghe said Sri Lanka is currently focusing on a four-market policy to be competitive, which will include the RCEP Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Indian market. Further, the head of state said laws hindering the development of the island nation will be identified for removal.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe attended a business roundtable today titled Sri Lanka's Economic Revival and Opportunities for Japanese Enterprise. The event, which was jointly organized by Japan External Trade Organization, Japan Sri Lanka Business Corporation and the Embassy of Sri Lanka in Japan, aims to strengthen economic ties between the two nations.
As far as I am concerned, there is no turning back. It was a great tragedy for Sri Lanka. It was a big setback. But the measures we are taking to stabilize the economy also gives hope to Sri Lanka. Because my idea is not merely to stabilize the economy, but also to restructure the economy, to further liberalize the economy and make it growth-oriented economy. So those measures have now been taken and a final report is being prepared on economic stabilization and growth, which will be submitted to the cabinet in the coming few weeks. LRT was cancelled without the cabinet being informed, just by one official. The damage was done. Confidence was lost. So what are we doing now? The cabinet agreed that we can't allow this to happen again under any government. So we are bringing in laws which will ensure that once mega project agreement is signed, it has to be tabled in parliament. Annual reports given on the implementation to parliament, and it cannot be changed or altered without the consent of all the parties involved. So that will ensure that no government can take arbitrary decision on the basis of a report given by a few individuals. Then in regard for the private investments, we do have investment treaties which are guaranteed by the constitution, but I will bring some more laws to give further effect to those investment guarantees. We have had Board of Investments and a Export Development Board. I am doing away with all that and bringing one single Economic Development Commission which will be the sole authority on making decisions, and the law will prescribe certain periods within which such discussions are made. So I am absorbing export development and investment promotion to one agency. The BOI has one strength. It runs the best industrial estates, the best investment zones in South Asia. So we separate that into an investment infrastructure corporation where the new investment zones, whether it be for manufacturing, tourism, technology, will be started under separate companies, can be private, can be government, or it can be a public-private partner. All the laws and regulations regulations which have hindered the development of business is being identified for removal. So we have decided and I told Parliament that I want Sri Lanka to enter the RCEP. With RCEP, a round of liberalization has to take place. We have to become more competitive. And then I said we will also agree at that time that within a given time frame, a medium-term time frame, we will enter become a member of Trans-Pacific Partnership. So that's the second one. This is what I want to do. We are a small island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Then we haven't got the large markets, but we are areas in which we can specialize and we can aim at the larger market. The biggest market for us is going to be the RCEP. So we are looking at a 4-market policy. That is, we have the Indian market, RCEP, the Comprehensive, Progressive and Trans-Pacific Partnership, and we already have an agreement with the European Union. We'll further deepen it. Sri Lanka, if you look at the developments that's going to take place in India, a fast-growing economy, then you will see even in the next 50 years, Pakistan, Iran, all will develop. With all that shipping taking place and the developments that are taking place in Africa when the new ports come in, Sri Lanka to become a regional logistic hub. Both the ports and the airport. For instance, in Colombo, the port and the airport are both very close by. And a new harbour in Colombo, which Subana Jurong of Singapore is planning out. A completely new harbour. So that's the possibilities we have.
Meanwhile, during his official stay in Japan, President Ranil Wickremesinghe also engaged in talks with the Vietnamese Deputy Prime Minister and Japan's Minister of Digitization and several other officials. During his meeting with Japan's Minister of Digitization, President Wickremesinghe emphasized the importance of enhancing cooperation between Japan and Sri Lanka in their respective digital transformation endeavors.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe engaged in talks with Vietnamese Deputy Prime Minister Tran Lu Quang in Tokyo today. According to the President's office, discussions between the two leaders primarily focused on strengthening bilateral relations and fostering cultural cooperation between Sri Lanka and Vietnam. Simultaneously, another meeting took place between Japan's Minister of Digitization Taro Kono and President Ranil Wickremesinghe. During the meeting, President Wickremesinghe provided a comprehensive overview of Sri Lanka's program to advance towards a digital economy. Furthermore, the importance of enhancing cooperation between Japan and Sri Lanka in respective digital transformation endeavors were emphasized during the discussion. Meanwhile, the head of state also joined a meeting with the Japan-Sri Lanka Parliamentary Friendship Association.
Former chairman of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka and human rights activist Dr. Pratibha Mahanamaheva warned that another resolution will be adopted at the next session of the United Nations Human Rights Council against Sri Lanka if the government fails to amend the provisions of the anti-terror bill that violates the fundamental human rights. Speaking to Indivari Amuwatta during our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, Dr. Mahanamaheva said a certain level of clarification is also essential in the bill in order to separately identify peaceful protesters and those who vandalize state property.
We're talking about the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Let's start talking about the current laws and regulations, the situation in Sri Lanka.
The gazetted one, highly criticized. The main criticism, there are 4 areas. United Nations, what they say, you must protect fundamental human rights. If that is not coming under the CTA, then another session we have to suffer in this June as well as in October. They will pass another 52 resolution against
As per the draft, are we addressing these areas that are required universally?
Certain areas, I agree. When a suspect for terrorist activities, when he arrested, when he give a confession to the police earlier, to the police means above the rank of ASP, which admitted against him as evidence. But now it has been abolished. That is one thing good. And the time period which keep him in the suspicion, that also reduced. But one thing I want to tell you, there are 4 areas we must arrest, definition of terrorism, time period, as well as the trial. So those 4, I also have some reservations.
Most of the criticism terrorism is stemming from the fact that the definition of terrorism
Yes.
is broader. So how do we define terrorism in a country?
Now, if you come to United Nations Standard Security Council, this is a resolution which came up for a standard acceptance.
Right.
One person or a group of people, when they come with serious criminal offences or destroying the property, public property, murder, as well as other things, keeping people as hostage. Likewise, they also have a broader definition. So you have to see which one we are going to do.
In these advanced democracies, as we
Yes.
call, how do they define the acts of vandalism of public property or state
Yes.
properties?
People, those who are expressing their ideas, those who go for demonstration, are they terrorists? Actually, they are not terrorists. Now, what we have to do, we have to get the motivation of that. Now, let's see a group of people, they are having a demonstration. That demonstration further, if that extend and they go for vandalism, what will happen?
Is the concern that the counterterrorism bill, the draft, it includes provisions which would actually arrest those who are demonstrating rather than those who are vandalizing state property? Is there provisions as such?
Yes, that we need certain type of clarification or explanation. Now let's see the penal code, certain examples they have given to explain that offense. So that's why we need. Now let's see, if you see people who are peacefully demonstrating, they are not terrorists. But actually there can be certain areas where they go for violent activities. Then whether they have that motivation. No, that's why we have to see it. So peaceful demonstration, how they do it. There are Supreme Court cases where even reasonably or even peacefully, even a standard way, you can criticize rather than defamation. So state, that is, vandalism is totally different. Someone can push them into that. So innocent people, they go and start this demonstration. They want to show their anger. That's all right. Now the problem where even that, how many government establishments are there? High security zones. They were not allowed. Even in Canada, you can go for demonstration, but separate places are there. So the government should provide. But Sri Lanka, sometimes it go little bit beyond. Then you obstruct the freedom of movement. You block the road and go. No, there should be some way you can have your march, but not to violate others' rights also. The question you asked, yes, that provision little bit amend. Or even that provision exclusive, so inclusive should be given. And it can be explained when you are going to pass this law in future. Prevention of Terrorism Act, one thing is there, keeping them for a longer period is a violation. That we have to understand.
Of their fundamental rights as an
right. Because as soon as possible, you have to release them. Now, another problem. When a person arrested for suspect of a terrorist, what is the next stage? Then police produce him to magistrate court, or even thereafter they take a detention order for 90 days. That time period varies from country to country. How many days you need to investigate him? Under the investigation stages, who do the investigation? Police. He must have access to a magistrate. That is where judicial intervention is very important. Let's see France. In France, there are investigative judges. In Sri Lanka, we don't have investigative judges. So after 3 days, they inform Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission, and they can come and access and see whether his rights are protected, and you must produce him to a magistrate. So likewise, even you keep for a long time period, what will happen? It should be protect his fundamental right, and he should be monitored or surveilled by a magistrate. That should be there, which is happening in most of the countries. So he may be directly funding for terrorists, or he may be involved, he may be a leader, but his right to life is there. What I want to tell, in the investigation, you must have at least set up in future only to hear these terrorist cases. That is number one, High Court. And thereafter, with the emerging technologies there, as well as you can use a lot of type of these communication new systems, whether you are naming him or whether you are releasing him, that must be decided.
Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Vijayasekara says that fuel quota currently allowed on the National Fuel Pass QR system will be increased from next month. Taking to Twitter, the minister noted that the current quota will be increased for all vehicles from the fuel price revision scheduled to take place in June. According to the minister, the decision was taken yesterday at a meeting held with the Marketing, Finance and Commercial divisions of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. The Ceylon Petroleum Corporation's cargo and distribution plans and finances were also reviewed during the meeting. The existing fuel quota allocated for three-wheelers is 8 litres, while buses, cars and lorries are entitled for 60, 30 and 75 litres of fuel respectively. Meanwhile, the quota for quadric cycles is 6 litres, while special purpose vehicles and vans are entitled for 30 litres of fuel, weekly fuel quota rather. The 4 suspects arrested in connection with the recent death of the 16-year-old minor in Kalutara district have been further remanded until the 9th of June on orders of the Kalutara Magistrates Court. Meanwhile, the 30-year-old private tutor accused of sexually abusing at least 16 schoolgirls in Kalutara was also further remanded until the 9th of June after being produced before the Kalutara Magistrates Court.
On the 6th of May, a naked corpse of a 16-year-old was found near the railway tracks in Kalutara after she reportedly fell to her death from the 3rd floor of a 5-story hotel in the area. Following the incident, the main suspect, a 29-year-old resident of Kalutara, was arrested on the 9th of May, 3 days after the teen's body was recovered. A young couple aged 19 and 22 who had accompanied the victim and another individual identified as the driver of the car in which the group travelled in was also arrested in connection with the incident. Accordingly, the relevant group was further remanded until the 9th of June when the case was taken up before the Kalutara magistrate this morning. Meanwhile, the 30-year-old private tutor who was arrested for sexually abusing at least 16 schoolgirls was also further remanded until the 9th of June. When the suspect was brought before the court this morning, a group of local youths engaged in a silent demonstration, demanding stern action against the culprit.
We'll be back after a short commercial break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන්කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ටීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි. ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ටීමෝ වෙතින්.
Welcome back in business news. State Minister of Investment Promotion Dilum Amunugama said that Sri Lanka has received $604 million worth of foreign investments during the first quarter of 2023. Speaking at a media briefing held this afternoon, the State Minister also revealed that a pilot project to cultivate cannabis has been approved by an expert committee.
විස්සයි විසුතුනේ මුල්කාර්තුවේ $ඩොලර් මිලියන 604ක් ආයෝජන අපිට ලැබිලා තියෙනවා. අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා වසරේ අග වෙනකොට අපිට බිලියනයට එහා හෝ බිලියන 1.5ක හෝ 2කට එහා යන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි.
The Minister of Investment Promotion Dilum Amunugama also revealed about a pilot project on cannabis plantation.
BOI will be going ahead with the pilot project for cannabis, so that is also a new sector we are looking at. We have been authorized because the expert committee report is out, so it's a yes. We got instructions to go ahead with the pilot project through BOI. So we are discussing with investors and also experts. Very soon we will start experimenting. We have so many proposals, but we will starting with one. So we will have to select an area and we will zone it. Obviously we will get it into a zone. And maybe we will start out with a couple of investors who will obviously bring in more dollars because it's about what they manufacture out of it and what the value is. So we will try and pick the best, maybe 2 or 3, and start off with them in a suitable area. They will obviously have to not only grow it, they'll have to manufacture a final product, which will be the value addition part, and that will be the income of the... So how we do it is being discussed. That's why we have got down some experts. We are working with the experts plus the investors, mostly foreign guys, so that we won't have dispute later once we lay the rules.
Sri Lanka's merchandise export performance for the first 3 months of this year decreased by 9.78% compared to the corresponding period of 2022. According to the Export Development Board, the declining trend in merchandise exports further continues due to the negative trends shown in major export products such as apparel and textiles, rubber and rubber-based products, and coconut-based products.
According to the statistics released by the Export Development Board, Sri Lanka's merchandise exports decreased by 16.15% to $814.1 million in April 2023 compared to April 2022. It is also a 0.5% reduction compared to April 2021. Export earnings from tea climbed to 16.1% year-on-year to $93.39 million in April 2023 compared to April 2022. Earnings from electrical and electronic components increased by 16.14% year-on-year to $40 million in April, with strong performance in exports of insulated wire and other electrical and electronic products. Seafood export earnings meanwhile stood at $24.76 million during the month, which is a 17.1% increase compared to the month of April of the corresponding year. This increase was mainly due to the strong performance in export of frozen fish, fresh fish and shrimps. However, earnings from apparel and textile exports declined by 23.1% year-on-year to $342.81 million in April this year compared to April last year. Further, rubber export performance during the month also saw a 22.28% reduction compared to April last year. Earnings of the sector decreased to $55.4 million as a result of the poor performance in exports of pneumatic and retreated rubber tires and tubes and industrial and surgical gloves. For the period of January to April 2023, meanwhile, overall merchandise exports decreased by 9.78% to $3.81 billion compared to the corresponding period of 2022, which recorded $4.2 billion. Earnings from export of tea increased by 11.02% to $407.6 million due to the increase of all the subcategories of tea sector except bulk tea and tea bags. Electrical and electronic components exports recorded a performance of $166.81 million between January and April 2023, mainly due to high export levels in switches, boards and panels, and other electrical and electronic products. Export earnings from seafood, meanwhile, increased by 2.87% to $21.95 million during the period of January to April 2023 compared to the year 2022. Out of top 10 export markets, only the UAE market and Italy market have shown a positive performance during the period of January to April 2023 compared to the corresponding period of previous year. When considering Sri Lanka's single largest export destination, the exports to the United States of America decreased by 22.42% to $193.2 million in April 2023. Further, exports to the US decreased by 16.65% to $914.9 million in the period of January to April 2023 compared to the same period in 2022.
Sri Lankan shares closed lower on Friday, dragged by losses in industrial stocks. The old share price index settled down 0.18% at 8,697.07, falling for 2 straight sessions. John Keel's Holdings plc and Conglomerate Sri Lanka Holdings plc were the top losers on the CSE old share, falling 1.62% and 0.89% respectively. Trading volume on the CSE old share price index rose to 25.9 million shares from 22.9 million shares in the previous session. The market turnover fell to 729.7 million Sri Lankan rupees, or $2.45 million from 893.5 million rupees in the previous session. The banking sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, while food, beverage and tobacco sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net sellers, offloading stocks worth 246.5 million rupees, while domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing shares worth 709.3 million rupees. Now let's have a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Global oil prices ticked up today as the market weighed conflicting messages on supply from Russia and Saudi Arabia ahead of the next OPEC Plus policy meeting. Brent crude was up by 1% to settle at $77.03 a barrel, while US West Texas Intermediate rose by 1.3% to $72.79 a barrel. Both prices were still poised to post a second week of gains. A deal to raise the US debt ceiling, which appears in sight, would likely boost oil prices. Worries of weaker than expected demand growth globally capped gains ahead of an expected rise in oil demand in the second half of the year, especially from China. Meanwhile, bets on falling oil prices are on the rise. The dollar has strengthened this month against a basket of major peers, making dollar-denominated commodities such as oil more expensive for those holding other currencies. With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.